The air was thick with dust and fear. The arena stood in the middle of a wide desert, a circle of stone older than any empire in the stars. Its walls were carved with marks of creatures long gone, beasts, hunters, and things that no one dared to name. Above the stone walls, hundreds of alien eyes watched from the stands. They came from many worlds, covered in scales, fur, or metal armor, but all shared one emotion: curiosity mixed with fear. The arena had seen blood before, but not this kind of blood. In the center stood a human. Her name was Captain Mira Solon, though the aliens only called her the Soft One. She wore no armor, only a torn flight suit marked with dust and burns. Her hands were cut, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes, calm, gray, and unshaken, made even the fiercest warriors look away. Mira did not speak. She only looked at the three creatures standing across from her. They were huge, members of the Rolic, a species born from war and bred for strength. Each one stood over 8 feet tall, with thick black hides and eyes that burned like blue fire. Their claws could tear steel, and their teeth could bite through bone. They circled her slowly, tails sweeping the sand. The crowd waited. No one cheered. No one moved. The silence was heavy, as if the air itself feared to break it. In the high seats, a group of Rolic elders watched. Among them sat a small cub, young, golden-eyed, no older than 6 seasons. His name was Tehran. He sat close to his mother, tail wrapped around his legs. His heart beat fast. He did not understand why they were fighting this small human. She looked weak. She looked lost. But something about her made his fur stand on end. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena, deep and sharp like breaking metal. By the order of the high clans, this human, Mira Solon, stands trial in the arena. She faces the claws of the Rolic Three. The fight ends only when she is dead or when she has earned respect. The crowd still did not move. Myra's breath was steady. Her eyes did not leave her opponents. She did not beg. She did not bow. Tehran leaned closer to his mother and whispered, "Why does she not look afraid?" His mother did not answer. She watched the human with a strange expression, something close to respect. The first Rolic warrior, a giant named Korvok, stepped forward. He was known for his cruelty and his pride. He lifted his clawed hand and roared, shaking the air. Dust rose around him. Still, Mira did not flinch. She moved one step back, lowering her stance. She said nothing, but her eyes, her human eyes, met his without fear. For a heartbeat, even Korvok hesitated. Then he charged. The crowd leaned forward. The ground trembled as his feet struck the stone. His claws swung like blades toward her chest. And then she moved. It was fast, too fast. She dropped low, letting his attack pass over her. Her hand shot out, catching his wrist. She twisted. There was a sharp crack. The sound echoed through the arena. Korvok fell to one knee, roaring in pain. Mira struck once, a single, short punch to the side of his neck. The giant collapsed, unmoving. Silence. The crowd froze. Even the wind seemed to stop. Tehran's small mouth fell open. He had never seen a Rolic fall so easily. Mira stepped back, breathing slow and quiet. Her eyes moved to the next warrior. She looked almost sad. The second warrior, Saren, growled but did not move. Sweat ran down his neck. His tail flicked nervously. The third, Vor, looked from Korvok's still body to Myra's calm face. For the first time in his life, he felt something he could not name. Fear. Up in the stands, the elders whispered among themselves. One said, "She fights without sound." Another replied, "She fights like she remembers something older than war." Tehran gripped the edge of his seat. His claws dug into the stone. He could not stop staring at her. "Mother," he whispered again, "what is she?" His mother placed a paw on his shoulder. and said softly, "Watch and learn, little one." In the center of the arena, Mira stood alone. Her shadow stretched long under the twin suns. The wind began to move again, carrying the smell of dust and fear. She did not smile. She did not look proud. She only whispered, almost too softly to hear, "One down." Tiran heard those words. They sounded calm, too calm for a creature who had just defeated a warrior of legend. Around him, the silence returned. No one clapped. No one shouted. Even the announcer's voice was gone. The only sound was a low hum of wind brushing across stone. In that silence, every alien in the arena felt the same strange thing. They did not feel pity for the human. They felt pity for whoever faced her next. And though the fight had only begun, Tiran already understood one truth, one he could not yet say aloud. This human was no prey. She was a predator. The arena stayed silent for a long time. Dust floated through the still air, twisting in the sunlight. 3 shadows had entered the circle, but now only 2 remained standing. Korvac, the first warrior, lay on the sand like a broken statue. His chest still rose and fell, but he would not wake soon. His fall had changed something in the air, something no one could name. Mira Solon stood alone, her hands at her sides, her eyes calm. Her breath came slow, steady, quiet. The crowd still could not speak. Even the smallest noise felt like it would anger the silence that surrounded her. High above, the Rolic elders watched with cold eyes. They had seen wars and duels, but never this. Never a human standing among them without fear. Elder Tavrek, the oldest among them, broke the silence with a low growl. She moves like prey, but strikes like the void. Beside him, the small cub Tiran stared down at the human. His heart thumped fast in his chest. He did not understand what he was seeing. She was smaller than any of them, thinner, weaker. Her skin looked soft. Her arms were bare. Yet she had dropped a warrior 3 times her size with a single motion. He looked at his mother. How did she do that? His mother didn't answer. Her eyes never left Mira. There was a look on her face that Tiran had never seen before, respect mixed with unease. Down below, the second warrior, Saren, growled. He was younger than Korvac, faster and more brutal. He had trained his whole life for battle, carving victory scars into his skin. He looked at the human and saw not strength, but insult. "You are lucky," he snarled, his voice echoing through the arena. Korvac was slow. "I am not." Mira did not respond. She tilted her head slightly, her gray eyes fixed on him. Her silence burned worse than any insult. Saren lunged. He moved like a storm, claws flashing, tail whipping behind him. Sand exploded beneath his feet as he closed the distance. Mira waited. She didn't move until the last moment. Then, with one step to the side, she vanished from his line of attack. The crowd gasped. Saren's claws hit empty air. His balance broke for a heartbeat, and in that heartbeat, Mira struck. Her elbow hit his ribs, her knee his throat. Every movement was small, quick, and perfect. Saren fell to ground, coughing, one hand clutching his chest. But Mira didn't finish him. She stepped back, letting him breathe. "Get up," she said quietly. "You're not done." Her voice was soft, but it carried through the arena like thunder. The crowd stirred. Murmurs spread like waves through the stands. Some whispered that she was using tricks, some said it was luck, but most said nothing, because deep down they knew this was not luck. This was control. Saren rose again, shaking with rage. His pride burned hotter than pain. He leapt, slashing wildly, his tail cutting through the air with a sharp crack. Mira ducked, blocked, and twisted around him. Her movements were smooth, no wasted motion, no sound of effort. When she struck again, it was like lightning. A single open palm to the side of his neck. His body froze for a second, then dropped to the sand with a dull thud. The arena went silent once more. Two giants lay at her feet. Mira stood still, breathing slow, her eyes lifted toward the stands. Thousands of alien eyes looked back, and none dared blink. Up above, Tyron finally spoke. His small voice trembled. "Mother, is she one of us?" His mother turned her head slowly. "No, my son. She is human." Tyron frowned. "But humans are weak. That's what the elders say." His mother's gaze darkened. Then perhaps the elders have forgotten what they once were. The cub's ears twitched. He looked again at Mira, the strange creature who stood quiet and strong in the middle of fallen warriors. For the first time, he did not see her as weak. He saw something he could not name. Something older. Something dangerous. Down in the arena, the final warrior, Vor, took a step forward. He was the largest of the three, broad, powerful, and silent. His armor gleamed black under the suns. He did not roar. He did not threaten. He only watched Mira, and for a long moment she watched him back. Their eyes met, predator to predator. Around them, the crowd began to breathe again. The silence cracked with whispers. Fear, awe, confusion. Elder Tavrek leaned forward, his claws tapping against the railing. "The first strike shows a hand," he murmured. "The second shows the soul. What will the third reveal?" No one answered. Below, Mira brushed dust from her sleeve. Her voice was calm, almost kind. "You don't have to fight me," she said to Vor. "Walk away." But the warrior only bared his teeth. "We finish what we begin, human." Mira nodded once. "Then I'll finish it quickly." The wind began to howl through the open arena again, carrying the weight of silence and storm. The sand lifted in small circles around their feet. Tyron's small hand tightened on the edge of the stone bench. His breath caught in his throat. He didn't know what he was about to see, but he felt it deep inside. Something great, something terrible. And as the two figures circled each other under the twin suns, the crowd forgot to cheer, forgot to move, forgot to breathe. Because every creature there, from the smallest cub to the oldest elder, could feel it now. The apex was awake. The sound of the wind was the only thing that dared to move in the arena. Every eye was on the two who remained, Mira Solon the human, and Vor, the last of the Rolic Three. The sand between them shimmered under the heat of the twin suns. The air itself seemed to wait. Vor took a slow breath. His heavy chest rose and fell, each breath deeper than the last. His claws flexed, digging lines in the sand. He was no fool. He had seen what this human could do. Korvok, the brute, had fallen fast. Saren, the young and strong, had fallen faster. And now only he remained. But he was not afraid. Not yet. Or at least, that's what he told himself. He lifted his head, meeting Myra's calm eyes. They were strange eyes, not cruel, not wild, but steady. They looked at him like he was being measured, not challenged. That look made his heart beat harder. From the high stands, the crowd leaned closer. None of them spoke. The silence had changed from shock to something darker, respect, maybe, or the first edge of fear. The elders whispered among themselves. "She fights without rage," said one. "No glory, no hate. That's why she wins," another answered. "She wastes nothing." And far to the side, the cub Tyron listened, his golden eyes wide. He could not look away from her. Every move, every breath, every pause. It was like watching a story unfold that he could not yet understand. He whispered to his mother, "Does she have power we don't see?" His mother replied softly, "Her power is control, little one. She fights her fear instead of feeding it." Tyron tilted his head. "But isn't fear what makes us fight?" His mother's gaze stayed fixed on Mira. Not for them. Down below, Vor finally spoke. His deep voice rolled through the air. Human, I will give you honor. You have fought well. When you fall, your name will be remembered. Mira did not answer. She only said, You talk too much. A quiet laugh spread through a few parts of the crowd. Nervous, short, uncertain. Vor lowered his stance. He began to move in slow circles, studying her. She mirrored him, her steps soft and deliberate. The moment stretched. Then he moved, fast, powerful, precise. His claws cut through the air, each swing strong enough to tear through stone. But Mira was not there. She slid between his strikes, each motion smaller, smoother, calmer. She ducked under his arm, spun behind him, and drove her palm into the back of his knee. Vor stumbled. His balance broke. She stepped forward and struck his ribs. Once, twice, quick, controlled hits. He turned, roaring, swinging wildly. His claws scraped the air just inches from her face. She moved again, faster this time. Her foot swept behind his leg. He crashed to the ground. Sand fly around him. The roar of the crowd came at last, but it was not a cheer. It was confusion, shock, disbelief. 2 times she had fought. 2 times she had won. Now, for the 3rd time, she stood victorious, and the aliens finally began to understand. This was not luck. This was not chance. This was something ancient. Vor pushed himself up, panting. His massive frame shook. His claws trembled. He looked at her and said quietly, almost himself, You don't fight like prey. You fight like us. Mira shook her head. No, she said softly. You fight like beasts. I fight to end the fight. The words hit harder than her strikes. Tiran blinked. He didn't understand at first. But when he looked at her eyes, calm and tired, he understood a little more. She didn't fight for glory or survival. She fought because she had to. She fought because somewhere long ago, humans had learned the hard way what fear could do and how to use it. Vor roared again, trying to stand, but his knees gave way. He fell back to the sand with a heavy thud. The silence returned. The crowd began to shift uneasily. What had once been a show had turned into something else. Something that felt sacred and dangerous. Elder Tavrek stood. His deep voice carried through the air. Enough. The trial is done. But before anyone could move, Tiran's voice broke through the silence. Small, trembling, and clear. Mother, why do they call her human if she fights like the apex? Every head turned. Even the wind seemed to stop. The elders looked down at the cub. Mira lifted her gaze to where he sat. Their eyes met, child and warrior. She did not smile. She did not frown. She only watched him, and in her calm stare, he saw something no one had ever shown him before. Respect. Elder Tavrek spoke again, slowly. The child does not understand what he says. There are no more apex. The age of monsters is gone. But Myra's quiet voice rose from below. You keep telling yourself that. The arena fell completely silent again. The elders looked at one another. The crowd dared not breathe. Even the cub felt a strange chill run down his spine. For the first time, fear spread not through one warrior, but through all who watched. Not fear of death, not fear of power, but the deep, cold fear that comes when you realize an old story might still be true. The apex had never vanished. They had simply learned to walk in human skin. The dust had begun to settle. 3 warriors lay broken on the arena floor. Their armor cracked, their claws dull, their pride shattered. Above them, Captain Mira Solon stood in silence. The sun's painted her shadow long and sharp across the sand. Her breathing was steady, her eyes calm, but inside, something old had awakened. The Rollick crowd still watched, frozen. No one cheered. No one spoke. The weight of what they had seen pressed down on every heart like a storm waiting to break. Up among the stone seats, the cub Turan could not look away. His small claws gripped the edge of the stone bench. The wind ruffled the fur on his head, but he didn't feel it. He looked at the fallen warriors, then at the human, so small, so quiet, and yet she stood while they fell. He whispered, "Mother, what is she?" His mother didn't answer. Her golden eyes were fixed on the human, unreadable and distant. Elder Tavrek finally spoke, his voice low but clear. "The fight is over. The trial is complete." No one moved. Even the guards hesitated. Something in the air felt unfinished. Mira turned her head toward the elder's platform. Her voice was calm, almost soft. "You brought me here to prove weakness. Did I prove it?" Tavrek's jaw tightened. "You prove that humans can kill. That is not strength." Mira tilted her head slightly. "No," she said, "but it's survival. You remember that word, don't you?" The old Rollick flinched. Around him, the younger ones whispered, unsure what she meant. Turan glanced between them, confusion mixing with fear. His mother leaned closer and whispered, "Be silent, my son. This is no longer about battle." Down below, Mira stepped closer to the center of the arena. She touched the ground with her hand, then stood straight again. The sand fell from her fingers like golden dust. "This world," she said quietly, "used to belong to hunters. Real ones, not those who fight for honor or for show. Hunters who fought because they had no choice." She looked up at the crowd. "You call me soft. You call me fragile. But humans learned to be more than hunters. We learned to survive when the universe wanted us gone." Her words rolled through the air, gentle yet heavy. Elder Tavrek growled, "Words do not make legends." Myra's eyes met his. "No," she said, "survival does." The silence grew deeper. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then a small voice broke it. "Why is the apex wearing human skin?" The words came from the cub. His voice was innocent, curious, but the moment they left his mouth, every creature in the arena froze. The elders turned their heads sharply toward him. His mother's paw shot out, covering his muzzle, but it was too late. The question had been asked, and Mira had heard it. She looked up, her gray eyes finding the small cub among the crowd. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she smiled, just slightly. "That," she said softly, "is a good question." Whispers rippled to the stands like waves in water. Did he call her the apex? Impossible. The apex are myths. The child is mistaken. No, maybe not. Elder Tavrek slammed his staff against the floor. The echo cracked through the silence. "Enough. The apex are long dead. No creature wears that name now." But the crowd no longer listened to him. Their eyes were on Mira, the calm, quiet human who had defeated three of their best without rage, without armor, without pride. Mira took a slow breath and spoke again. "You speak of the apex as if they vanished, but the truth is simple. They stopped hunting others." She looked around, her voice steady and sharp, "because they learned to hunt themselves." The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Turan stared at her, his young mind spinning with confusion. "Hunt themselves," he whispered. His mother's voice was low, filled with something like awe. "It means they learned to master what they were, to cage the monster instead of freeing it." Elder Tavrek shouted down, "Enough, human! You will leave this arena." Mira didn't move. Her gaze stayed on him. "You fear the apex because you don't understand them," she said. "But the apex were never monsters. They were survivors. They were what came after fear." She turned slightly, looking at the fallen warriors, then back to the cub. And sometimes, she said softly, survival looks like mercy. She walked toward the edge of the arena. The guard stepped aside, uncertain. As she passed them, she stopped once more and looked up at the stands. Her eyes found Tiran again. "Remember this, cub," she said. "The apex don't roar. They don't boast. They endure. And that's what makes them human." Then she turned and walked through the gate, disappearing into the bright light beyond. For a long time, no one spoke. Tiran sat frozen, his heart pounding. His small voice trembled as he whispered again, "Mother, was she really the apex?" His mother looked at the empty arena floor and said quietly, "If she was not, then the stories lied." And as the wind returned to the silent arena, carrying the last grains of dust into the sky, every creature who had watched that fight knew the same truth. The apex had not vanished. They had only learned to look like humans. Night had fallen over the Rollick city. The twin suns had sunk below the dunes, and the arena now stood quiet, a circle of stone glowing under the pale blue light of the moons. The sand had been cleaned. The crowd had gone. But whispers still drifted through the city like echoes that refused to die. The human, she fought like the apex. She broke 3 of them. No rage, no mercy, no fear. Every home repeated the story. Every tavern shared her name. And in the high towers where the elders gathered, silence ruled once again. Elder Tavrek sat before the flame of memory, an old fire that burned blue instead of red. His claws traced patterns in the sand. The room smelled of smoke and age. Behind him, the door opened. It was Tiran's mother, the warrior named Rasha. She entered quietly, carrying the young cub in her arms. Tavrek did not turn. "You should not have brought the child," he said. Rasha's voice was calm. "He asked to come. He asked questions I cannot answer." The old elder sighed. "And you hope I can?" She nodded. Tavrek looked up at the flame. Its glow reflected in his old, tired eyes. "He saw too much today," he said softly. "But perhaps it is time someone saw the truth." He turned to Duran. "Come closer, little one." The cub stepped forward. His tail twitched nervously. "Elder," he said, "was she really the apex?" Tavrek's gaze dropped to flame. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he whispered. Once, the word apex was not a name. It was a warning. He pointed to the flame, and as Tiran watched, shapes began to appear in the smoke. Faint images of strange creatures. Long before the Rollick walked these sands, before even the stars had names, there were others, beasts who ruled every world they touched. The apex were not born strong. They were born afraid. The smoke shifted, showing smaller creatures running from shadows larger than themselves. Fear made them hunt. Hunger made them fight. And pain taught them to adapt. Every wound made them sharper. Every death made the next one smarter. The images changed again, the small figures standing upright, their eyes filled with light. They learned tools. They learned fire. But most of all, they learned patience. That is what made them different. They did not need to be the fastest or the biggest. They only needed to be the last. Tiran's eyes widened. Were they humans? Tavrek's voice grew softer. Perhaps, or perhaps humans are what they became after they forgot what they were. Rasha frowned. You speak as if you saw them. The elder smiled bitterly. I did not see them, but I saw their work. The ruins, the stories, the bones buried beneath worlds that no longer breathe. The flame flickered, showing a battlefield under a red sky. Machines twisted, mountains burned. They fought the void, the cold, the hunger. Even when the universe turned against them, they refused to die. When the stars dimmed, they found fire. When their bodies broke, they built new ones. And when every other race fell, they endured. He turned to Duran. That is why she fights the way she does. The Apex were never made for glory. They were made to survive. They never forgot the darkness that made them. Duran swallowed hard. But if they were so strong, why hide? Why pretend to be human? Tavrek's expression darkened. Because strength without mercy becomes madness. The Apex learned that too. The fire changed again. Now the smoke showed faces, cold, empty, filled with rage. They became so perfect at surviving that they began to destroy what made them alive. They hunted everything, even each other. They turned fear into fuel and power into poison, until one day they looked into the mirror and saw a monster staring back. He looked away, so they chose to start over, to forget, to hide inside something softer, something that could still feel guilt, love, pain. That's when humans were born, not a new race, but an old one trying to heal. The room was silent. Only the fire cracked softly. Rasha bowed her head. So she was one of them, one who remembered. Tavrek nodded slowly. A reminder that the Apex never died. They simply changed their shape. Tiran's small voice trembled. But is that why she smiled at me? The elder's eyes softened. Because you were not afraid. And she wanted you to understand. The Apex were never meant to be feared, little one. They were meant to remind the galaxy what fear can become when it learns compassion. He placed a claw gently on Tiran's shoulder. You asked a question no one dared to ask. That is why she looked at you. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert. The wind howled through the ancient walls. Tiran looked toward the window, where the stars shimmered like cold eyes watching from afar. Elder, he said softly, if humans are what the Apex became, what will they become next? Tavrek smiled faintly, his gaze lost in the flame. That little one, he said, depends on whether the rest of us learn before it's too late. The fire dimmed, leaving only shadows on the stone walls. And in those shadows, it almost looked as if something vast and ancient smiled, not with cruelty but with pride. The Apex had not vanished. They had only chosen a gentler name. The next dawn broke cold and red. The desert wind screamed across the empty plains, carrying with them the scent of metal and dust. In the heart of the Rala capital, the arena stood once more, silent, waiting. But this time it was not for sport. It was for judgment. Word of the humans' victory had spread to every corner of the empire. To some, she was a monster. To others, a miracle. To all, a question. Was humanity truly the lost Apex? Elder Tavrek watched from the high tower as soldiers filled the stands again. The Rallic banners waved in the morning wind, and the crowd returned, louder, heavier, filled with restless fear. At the center of the arena, Captain Mira Solon stood alone once more. Her uniform was torn, her skin marked with bruises, but her stance was steady. Calm. Still, she had slept little. Memories haunted her. Faces from a war long past. Battles fought on worlds that no longer existed. The ghosts of humanity's old sins whispered to her through the silence. But Mira didn't fight ghosts. She fought for the living. Across the arena, a new gate opened. From the darkness inside came a sound like thunder. Deep, slow steps, each one shaking the ground. The final challenger had come. General Varkul, war chief of the Rallic. His armor gleamed black and silver, his claws long as blades. He was older than Mira, stronger than any warrior before him. His body bore the scars of 100 wars. The crowd roared his name, their fear hidden behind their cheers. Tavrek's voice echoed across the arena. This battle is the last. No tricks, no mercy. The truth will be shown in blood. The gate closed behind Varkul with a heavy crash. He stared at Mira with cold, yellow eyes. "Human," he said, his voice a growl. "You speak of survival and mercy. Show me both. Or die." Mira nodded once. "Then let's begin." The air went still. For a long moment, neither moved. Only the wind stirred the dust between them. Then Varkul attacked. He moved with terrifying speed, faster than anything that large should move. His claws slashed, his tail whipped, and his roar filled the air like thunder. Mira ducked low, sliding under the first strike. Her hand grazed the sand, her eyes tracking his movement. She could feel the strength behind every swing. Enough to tear through her, she made one mistake. But she didn't panic. She breathed, watched, waited. Varkul charged again, his claws coming down like blades. Mira rolled aside, catching his wrist and twisting it, just enough to unbalance him. She moved with precision, not rage. He stumbled, but recovered fast. His tail lashed out, catching her shoulder. The impact threw her back. She hit the sand hard, rolling, coughing. The crowd gasped. Turan, watching from the stand beside his mother, held his breath. "She's hurt." Rasha shook her head. "Watch her eyes." Mira rose slowly, dust clinging to her face. Her shoulder bled, but her gaze remained clear, calm, unwavering. She whispered, "You fight to win. I fight to stop fighting." Varkul roared again and came at her, striking again and again. Each blow fell like a hammer, shaking the ground. Mira dodged, blocked, absorbed the rhythm of his movements. And then, when the moment came, she moved, one step inside his guard, one open strike to his throat, a pivot, a fall. The giant dropped to his knees, gasping for breath. Mira stepped back, ready to finish it, but she didn't. She stopped. The crowd froze. She could have ended him. Instead, she opened her hand and said softly, "Yield." Varkul's eyes widened. His claws lowered. For the first time in his long life, he felt something strange, shame. He looked up at her. "You spare me?" Mira nodded. "Killing you proves nothing. Living with this moment will teach more than death ever could." The silence that followed was deep and endless. From above, Turan whispered, "She won, but she didn't kill him." Tavrek closed his eyes. "Now do you see, little one? The apex are not feared because they destroy. They are feared because they choose not to." Varkul slowly rose, one knee bent. He looked at her for a long time, then bowed his head, low, deep, full of respect. "You are no prey," he said. "You are what we forgot to be." Mira nodded once. "Then remember." She turned and began walking toward the gate. The crowd parted in silence, their eyes following her every step. No cheers, no music, only the sound of the wind. When she reached the shadow of the gate, she paused and looked back at the stands. Her gaze found Turan. The cub's eyes were wide, his heart pounding. She gave him a small, tired smile. "Never mistake kindness for weakness," she said softly. "The strongest ones always remember mercy." And then she walked into the light. When the gate closed, the crowd still did not move. The silence lingered, stretching through every soul like a quiet storm. Tavrek stood, his voice shaking. "Let it be written," he said, "that on this day a human reminded the galaxy what power truly means." Rasha placed a paw on her son's shoulder. "Do you understand now, Turan?" The cub nodded slowly. "She's not just the apex," he whispered. "She's what comes after." And above them, the wind carried the sound of the arena's silence. A silence not of fear, but of respect. The apex had returned. And this time they had learned mercy. The desert was quiet again. The wind swept gently across the empty arena, carrying the last traces of battle into the open sky. The suns had set, and the twin moons now hung above, painting everything in silver light. The crowd was gone. The torches had burned low. Only the echo of footsteps remained, the sound of one human walking away from history. Captain Mira Solon moved slowly through the long corridor beneath the arena. The air smelled of metal, dust, and blood. Every step felt heavy, not from pain, but from the weight of what she had left behind. The battle was over. She had won, but victory had never been the point. Outside, in the upper halls, the young cub Tiran ran to the shadows, his small paws silent against the stone. His mother called after him, but he didn't stop. He had to see her again. He followed the echo of her steps until he reached the gate that led to the traveler's docks. There, under the cold moonlight, he found her, standing beside a human ship, its engines quiet, its hull marked with scars. Mira looked up as he approached. A faint smile crossed her tired face. "You should be asleep, little one," she said softly. Tiran shook his head. "I couldn't. I had to ask something." She crouched down so her eyes met his. Her gray gaze was calm, but behind it was something ancient, something that carried both pain and peace. "What do you want to know?" she asked. The cub hesitated, his small claws curling against the ground. "Everyone says you are the apex. They say you're the monster from the old stories." Mira chuckled, a quiet sound that held no pride. "Do you believe that?" Tiran shook his head. "No, monsters don't smile." She smiled again, sad, gentle. "You're wiser than most." For a moment, neither spoke. The night was still, except for the hum of the ship. Then, in a small voice, Tiran asked, "Why do you fight if it hurts you?" Mira looked up at the stars. They shimmered faintly, scattered like tiny fires across the black. "Because someone has to," she said. "Because if no one stands, the darkness spreads. And not the kind in space, the kind that lives inside us." Tiran frowned. "Like fear?" She nodded. "Yes, fear is a shadow. You can't kill it, but you can walk through it." Her voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "That's what the apex learned too late. We thought power made us strong. But it was never power. It was choice." The cub tilted his head. "Choice. Choosing when to stop," she said. "Choosing when not to strike. When to forgive. That's harder than any fight." She looked back at him, her eyes soft. "Do you know why I spared your general?" Tiran shook his head. "Because if I killed him, you would grow up fearing humans," she said. "But if I let him live, maybe you'll grow up understanding them." Tiran's golden eyes shimmered. "You didn't win the fight, did you?" Mira smiled faintly. "No, I ended it." Behind them, Elder Tavrik appeared in the doorway, his staff tapping softly against the floor. He had followed in silence, watching from the shadows. "You speak like a teacher, human," he said. Mira turned slightly. "Someone has to teach what we forgot." Tavrik nodded slowly. "And what is that?" She looked toward the horizon where the desert met the stars. Her voice was quiet, but every word carried weight. "That the apex are not gone. They're just learning to be better." The old Rolic lowered his head. "Then perhaps the galaxy still has hope." Mira looked at him, then at Tiran. "Hope doesn't vanish," she said. "It hides, waiting for someone brave enough to find it again." She touched the cub's shoulder gently. "That might be you one day." Tiran blinked, his voice trembling. "Will I see you again?" Mira smiled. "If the stars will it." She turned toward her ship. The ramp rose behind her, glowing faintly with blue light. Before stepping aboard, she looked back one last time. The wind lifted her hair, and her voice carried through the night like a soft echo. "Remember, Tiran, the apex don't roar anymore." He frowned, confused. "Why not?" Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, because the galaxy already knows to listen. And then she was gone. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting slowly into the air. Sand and wind swirled together, chasing her into the dark sky. Tehran stood there long after the ship vanished into the stars. His mother came beside him, placing a paw on his shoulder. "Come," she said softly. "It's time to go home." But he didn't move. He looked up at the sky where the stars still burned. "Mother," he whispered, "do you think she's watching us?" Rasha smiled faintly. "No, little one. I think she's watching everyone." He nodded slowly. The desert wind brushed past them, whispering faintly like a voice carried through time. And though no one else heard it, the cub thought he could still hear her words, soft, distant, but full of warmth. "Be kind, be brave, and when fear comes, walk through it." He smiled, and as the night grew still, the stars seemed a little brighter, as if the universe itself remembered what it once feared and now what it finally respected. The apex had returned, not as monsters, but as teachers, and their whisper carried to the stars forever.